Okay, let's put supply and demand together now, and let's talk about equilibrium. And then we'll go through some examples. So here we have a demand curve, and here we have a supply curve represented on a graph. And remember, just to review the terminology, that here at $20, this is the y-intercept for the demand curve. And again, we put price up here. Let me label these axes properly. Price on the y-axis, and we put quantity down here on the x-axis. And this point here, 20, at a price of 20 and a quantity of 0, sometimes we call that the choke price. It just means that at a price of 20, this person or this community or this town will only buy 0, right? They won't buy any of this product, or they don't want to buy any of this product at a price of 20. That price is just too high. But as the price goes down, the quantity that they're willing and able to buy will increase. The law of demand says that as price goes down, the quantity demanded will increase. It means that if the price goes to 19, people will increase the amount they want to buy from 0 to 1, which we can see down here on the x-axis. And as the price goes down to 18, people will increase the quantity demanded they want to buy to 2, and so on. According to this diagram, for each dollar the price goes down, the quantity goes up by 1, down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1. But we don't say that the demand increases when the price goes down. Why not? Again, remember that this entire line here is demand. And unless the whole line increases, we don't say demand increased. We'll increase it in a minute. Supply, the law of supply says that as the price goes up, the quantity people are willing to supply goes up. Price goes up, quantity supplied goes up. Here it looks like the slope is 2/3, up 2 over 3. That means that for this supplier, for every $2 increase in the price, the quantity they're willing to supply goes up by 3. You could think about this as a choke price for the supplier. At a price of $2 or less, the supplier is willing to supply none. Now, let's look at where these two lines intersect each other. We call this an equilibrium. Now, why do we call this point right here an equilibrium? Well, the reason is this is the only price, $9, where the quantity that people want to buy and the quantity people want to sell happens to be the same at 11. Equilibrium means balance. It means that at a price of 9, the amount people want to buy and the amount people want to sell are in balance. Now, it's easiest to see what this means by looking at other prices. For example, let's look at a price of 11. Let me draw a line in here so we can focus our attention in on what's going on there. Let me change that color to blue. Suppose for some reason the price was not 11 in this market. Was not 9, it was 11. What would the sellers be thinking? Well, the sellers would be thinking, let me draw a little point right here. The sellers would be thinking that at a price of 11, I want to bring 14 to market and sell them. Great, but what are the consumers, the buyers, thinking? Well, the buyers are thinking that at a price of 11, I only want to buy 9. Okay, so if 14 are being brought to the market and people only want to buy 9, that's not okay, I guess. Things aren't in balance. There's going to be 14 brought to sell, only 9 sell, so there's a difference there of 5. And we call that 5 a surplus. A surplus means that there are going to be some left over. What's going to happen the next day if the price is 11 and sellers find that they have a lot of product left over that they can't sell? Well, there's going to be a push for the price to go down. Suppliers will lower their price When they lower their price, people will buy more. Suppliers won't want to sell as much though, and the price will keep going down until we get to this 9, where things are in balance. And the opposite kind of story can be told where the price starts off being lower than 9. So let's look at this case where suppose we're at the green line. The price, suppose, was $4 for some reason. People would want to buy 16. The quantity demanded would be 16. The quantity sellers would want to sell would only be 3, though. There's a huge shortage. There's a shortage of 16 minus 3. There's a shortage of 13. People want to buy 13 more than people are willing to sell. So there's this big shortage here. So let me label that. 13 shortage here. What's going to happen when there's a shortage? Well, the sellers are going to see that they're selling out very quickly at a price of 4, and that's going to cause pressure for the price to increase. People in the market are going to see, wow, this good's cheap, but I can't get as many as I want, and people are going to start bidding the price up. So there's going to be upward pressure on the price. And the price is going to get pushed up until we get to the point where the price is 9. Sellers are willing to sell 11. Buyers are willing to buy 11. So everything's in balance. Now, again, we're not saying that demand or supply is going up just because the price is going up. We're just saying that we're moving to different places on the demand and supply. So supply and demand don't change, but in this case, as the price goes up, people reduce the quantity they demand, and suppliers are increasing the quantity they supply. So quantity supplied, but demand and supply aren't changing because these lines representing demand and supply aren't moving. So now let's look at a couple of cases where demand or supply could change. So yesterday, the equilibrium price was 9, and buyers and sellers both bought and sold 11. But today something changes. Suppose we hit a recession and people don't have as much money. You have to ask yourself, is this something that's going to change supply, which is, so let me change the color of supply there. Is that going to change the red supply curve? Is it changing the willingness and ability of people to produce because consumers' incomes have dropped? No. It is going to change the willingness and ability of people to buy, though. People's ability, in particular, has changed. So what's that going to do to demand? Well, it's going to shift it. Let me see if I can pick this demand up here. It's going to shift it to the left. So let's suppose the demand goes down here. Let me change that color to blue. So demand has decreased. Now let me draw a little arrow here showing what happened to make sure we see it. Okay, now we have a nice big arrow there, just so we can really remember that demand started here and then it moved to the left, a decrease in demand. What are our predictions going to be? Well, if we happen to know exactly what the demand and supply look like and exactly how much the demand is going to move, right? And it's also good practice to label this new demand curve, like we'll, hold on. Sorry, I hit the wrong key there and it shrunk the picture. To label this new blue demand curve with D2, that way we know that it's something after a change has happened, after this income change in this example. If we know exactly what's happening to the curves, then we can be as specific as predicting, well, the new equilibrium price will be $6, and the new equilibrium quantity will be 6 units also. In general, we don't have that much information. We just want to be able to predict the direction of what's going to happen. In general, we know that when demand decreases, we know that's going to lower the equilibrium price because we started off at this point and the new point is lower. We know we're moving down on the price axis. Similarly, when demand decreases, the quantity is moving to the left, the equilibrium quantity. So we know the quantity that's going to be bought and sold in this market is going to go down. So for a product where we know that it's going to decrease demand for any reason, your prediction's going to be price goes down, quantity will go down. Our complete summary is going to be something like this. What happened to demand? Demand decreased. What happened to price? Price will go down. What happened to quantity? Quantity will go down. Here's the key question. What happened to supply? The answer, nothing. Why? Well, because the line representing supply didn't change. And there's no reason for it to change because consumers' incomes go down. That doesn't change the willingness and ability of suppliers to supply. We try to separate out what's going on with consumers from suppliers. Nothing happened to supply, but if you want to be specific, you can say the quantity supplied went down in response to the price decrease, but supply didn't change. You don't want to say supply decreased. Let's look at a different example. Go back and start from scratch here. Let's get rid of the demand change here. Okay, suppose we're back at equilibrium. People's incomes didn't go down. Suppose instead the government passes a law saying that we have to pay our workers more. Minimum wage increase, for example. Is this going to change supply or demand? Well, the obvious thing is going to be that this is something that's going to increase the cost of an input for the suppliers. It's not so obvious that it's going to change demand unless the workers are the exact same people as these demanders. But the workers are probably such a small fraction of all demanders that we're talking about. Focus on the obvious thing. And the obvious thing here, if we have to pay the workers in our industry more, that's going to shift supply. Now, if you have to pay your workers more, are you going to be more willing and able to supply the product, or is that going to make it harder and more costly to supply your product? Answer is going to make it harder and more costly to supply the product, so it's going to take your supply and decrease it. So let me change the color so we can focus on that, blue. And let me draw an arrow here. Okay, so because you pay more for any resource used to make something, whether it's the labor or the materials or the electricity, that's going to decrease the supply. And again, if you want to do this the right way, maybe label the new supply curve with a S2. That means that's the new supply or new supply. You can label it any way you want. What is our prediction about what's going to happen in this case? Well, a decrease in supply is a move to the left, just as a decrease in demand is a move to the left. What we want to be able to do is predict what's that going to do to the price and the quantity exchanged in the market. So we focus on these two blue circles, the old equilibrium at $9.11. We see that the new equilibrium is going to be at a higher price, maybe 12, and a lower quantity, maybe 8. In general, our prediction, any time supply goes down, ceteris paribus, and that's the only thing that's happening, supply goes down, is that's going to cause the price of the product to increase and the quantity of the product exchange to go down. So let's summarize. When we have to pay more for an input of a product, supply will decrease, causing price to go up, quantity to go down. What's going to happen to demand? Answer, nothing. But if you want to be specific, what do you mean nothing? Well, demand doesn't change, because demand is when something about consumers changes, not something about producing the good. However, the quantity people will buy, the quantity demanded will go down in response to the price change. That's just referring to the law of demand. Price goes up, people buy less. Price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. But we don't say demand changed for two reasons. The entire line didn't go down or go up because there's no reason to think in this case, or at least no obvious reason to think that something's changing about consumers' attitude about the product, their willingness and ability to buy the product. It's something more about the production of the product that has changed because the input costs have changed. So if you understand these two examples and you're careful to think, I'm not going to shift supply or shift demand unless I can identify something concrete about suppliers or about demanders that's going to change, you'll do yourself good. Now, in some cases, you can identify where both supply and demand could change. Let's look at one example of that real quickly here. Let's suppose that in addition, let's make the argument that we're a small town and two things are happening. We're a small town, self-contained, and we're talking about, I don't know, farmers. And most of the town is farmers, and two things are happening. We're having to pay the farmers, say farm hands, more to work for us. So that's decreasing the supply. We're willing to farm less wheat as owners of the farm because we have to pay farm hands more. That's going to decrease the supply. But if we can also make the argument that the main consumers of wheat are also these same farm hands, maybe we can justify making an argument that the demand for wheat will also go up. Because if we're paying the demanders more, these farm hands, they have more money to buy wheat, so maybe that's going to increase the demand of wheat. So if we're careful and we're sure that, yeah, maybe we should increase demand also, let's do that. So maybe demand will go up as in addition to supply going up. So let me change that to green. So we've got two things happening. We've got two moves here. So let me move this arrow here. Let me rotate it. Okay, so move number one was the move in supply. Move number two is going to be a move in demand. Let me twist this around so we can picture both of those moves. And we're moving first from the first blue dot to the second blue dot because of the decrease in supply. And now we're going to move to this final equilibrium. Label that pink here. Notice what happens when both supply and demand changes. It makes things a little more complicated, but as long as you follow from this point to this point, and then from this point to this point, let's make our final predictions. The decrease in supply, let me label these here. The supply change caused price to increase and a decrease in quantity. However,